Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us, and welcome to Bermuda, the Silicon Valley of the Atlantic. I'm Gayle Gorman, and will be moderating our panel this afternoon. I'm currently the Executive Director and co-founder of the recently launched InnoFund Innovation Incubator, or iCubed. I'm going to ask each of our panelists to introduce themselves, and they will also share with you the top word for them about what innovation in Bermuda really means. Andrew?
Hi, everyone. My name is Andrew Engler. I'm co-founder and CEO of Kettle. And I think innovation in Bermuda, the one word I'd use right now is adaptation.
Great. It's a great word. George?
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is George Alayon. I'm an assistant director here at the Bermuda Monetary Authority, and I currently oversee the innovation working group, taking care of the innovative companies, entering the Bermuda jurisdiction. When I think about innovation, the word that probably comes to mind is, can I just deviate a little? Can I make it a phrase? Can I use focused and well thought out?
Okay, we'll take that. Thank you, George.
Thank you.
Ari?
Hi, I'm Ari Chatterjee. I'm the Chief Underwriting Officer and the co-founder of Envelop Risk. And one word that comes to mind for Bermuda in terms of innovation is reputation.
Great, thank you. And Matt, last but not least.
Hi, everyone. My name's Matthew Jones. I'm on the investment team at Anthemis. We're a venture firm focused on financial services with a number of our portfolio companies active in Bermuda. And the word I'm going to go for is dynamic.
Great, thank you. And I think those words actually really set the stage for a question I have for each of you. The title of our session is Bermuda, the Silicon Valley of the Atlantic. And what I would be really interested in having you share with our audience is this link between the characteristics that have really shaped Silicon Valley and its sort of tech culture, and how those characteristics are also related to Bermuda and the innovation in the InsurTech space in particularly. But what does that look like? How does Silicon Valley and Bermuda, what do they have in common? Andrew, I'm going to come back to you first again, because I think you've actually had some direct experience in the Silicon Valley area.
Yeah, absolutely. They are incredibly similar, especially in terms of I guess, two primary factors. First, very tight-knit communities. So the Silicon Valley and especially the VC world of Silicon Valley is very tight-knit because you have many people making incredibly large bets or decisions. And so there's a lot of like counterparty risk that's incredibly important to have that old world structure of being able to connect and know the person that you're dealing with. So it was quite surprising when we started raising our funds in Silicon Valley to see how connected and interconnected that culture was in Silicon Valley, and similar to the Bermuda market and reinsurance. The other side of it too, that I'd say, before Silicon Valley was Silicon Valley, it was an apple orchard, and there's a specific reason on why that geolocation turned into the innovation hub for the world. And it wasn't because that there was some mineable resource there, or it wasn't like a gold rush. It was actually an information and knowledge spreading that somewhat was part of the universities. Was much more about as there was a compounding in education on a person-to-person level that you can see in very widely known examples of like Bill Hewitt living next to like Steve Jobs and teaching him out of his garage about computers. And so when you have one of these environments that's incredibly concentrated, where you have an older regulated world, much like the chip industry was, that is able to influence a very new and up and coming industry like the software industry was at the time, you really get this compounding effect of an incredible force of being able to innovate and spread at a rapid iteration. And it creates again, it's almost a compounding effect. And we see that both in Silicon Valley and also in Bermuda, where there's nowhere else in the world where you have such an adaptive regulatory regime that is that well respected, along with incredible amounts of capital and experience in underwriting, combined with this forward-looking view towards innovation.
Great, thank you. I love the comparisons. You can sort of see that already in the apple orchard is a great story. Would anybody else like to add to that?
Yeah, indeed. So I think very well said, Andrew. And I think what in my opinion, that Bermuda has always been in the forefront of insurance innovation in particular. I mean, insurance innovation is slightly different to some of the other technology innovations. Insurance fundamentally is a very capital hungry business. And you also have to know like various different facets of underwriting, the market structure. You have to understand how the products are developed and distributed. You need to have a solid regulatory background, like in Bermuda we have BMA, but also the how open and transparent the regulator is. I mean, it's quite underestimated and understated the role of regulation or transparent regulation is in terms of innovation. So we are here in Bermuda exactly for that reason. We see that it's a confluence of capital, innovation, and at the same time we see we can hire talent from all across the globe and house them in Bermuda to grow the business. And there's a lot of certainty of the outcome, which we found in many other jurisdictions much harder to get. I mean, it's okay to talk about brilliant products that you want to introduce in the market, but if you don't have the regulator or the capital backing it, it's much harder.
Great, thank you, George. That seems like a bit of an intro to you as well in terms of the kind of just the culture. Maybe you could describe a little bit at the BMA around how it's supporting some of the things that both Ari and Andrew have shared.
Great, yeah, and I certainly agree with what Ari and Andrew has stated earlier. And when I think about Silicon Valley, I can really associate it with the concentration of opportunities, capital, whether that's monetary or human capital. We have a good capital base here in Bermuda, a supportive culture and a lifestyle built on innovation, and then finally a supportive and enabling government and regulatory landscape. I think the island ticks off all of those characteristics when it comes to risk management. So with the fast pace advances in technology and evolution of the markets, the island can really offer a holistic business environment where both the startups as well as the established players can thrive together and feed off each other's strengths. So our role here at the BMA is to make sure that we provide a framework that is robust and credible, but also at the same time fit for purpose and reasonable for the companies that want to set up shop here. Our framework provides innovation starting from the principal tenets in which the legislation itself are grounded and crafted upon, down to the day-to-day implementation or application of these regimes. So I think together all these factors that we are mentioning here provide a flourishing marketplace where both innovative and traditional players can have a regulatory certainty. So as Ari said, this is very important, especially for companies to have that certainty. And therefore, it shows that Bermuda offers a clear head start for companies in whatever stage they are in, whether they're only starting up or they're already established or they're kind of in the middle. So wherever they are, we kind of have a place for all of these players. And then finally, looking in as well, the BMA realizes that we cannot operate the same way as before. We can't really dwell with our forms and checklists. And so internally, we are also actively building our infrastructure as well as our staff's skill set to make sure that we can effectively regulate these new sectors in a robust and sustainable manner.
Great, thank you very much. And that certainly validated some of the things that both Andrew and Ari have said. And Matt, I'll give you a chance to comment on this comparison between Silicon Valley and Bermuda.
I think the hardest thing about going last is that everyone's managed to say everything that I had in mind. I think the only couple of things that perhaps I would add at this point is, you know, Bermuda really benefits from having kind of built within it such a deep understanding of the insurance industry. And we're not even just talking about one part, we're talking about all layers, right? From insurance through reinsurance and ILS. And I think one of the things that stands out as being similar across both of these locations is this culture of kind of experimentation and willingness to try out new things, new models, new structures. You know, not all locations, for example, have got sandbox structures, for example. So I think all of those things individually are really important for any center that wants to excel in a given space. But I think when you combine them, and when you combine them in the context of the insurance industry, I think it's an incredibly powerful mix that you know, our portfolio companies, and we'll get into that in a little while, but and others can obviously benefit from.
That's great, thank you. And I think what I hope our audience may take away from those comments is that this comparison between Silicon Valley in California and Bermuda as the Silicon Valley of the Atlantic is actually quite legitimate. And I think you've really shared an interesting perspective and helped to really sort of validate that title. One of the things I think that would be really interesting to build on that is for you all to share your experiences in terms of forming a company here or working here in the sector, and what has really made Bermuda key to your success so far. And Ari, I'm going to start with you because I think you were one of the early licensed InsurTech organizations here and have had a bit of a longer journey perhaps. So what do you think about that? Why Bermuda? How did it help you?
Indeed, and that's a good story to tell people as well. It actually predates us forming the company. When I was working with the BDA on BDA 4.0, one of the working groups that we used to work together with various parts of the Bermuda ecosystem to kind of attract InsurTechs to set up on the island. So I had a long kind of relationship with the BDA as well. So with BDA, we were quite early on to kind of start working and engaging with BDA and BMA on what we are trying to do. And probably we were one of the first candidates in the BDA concierge as well. So yeah, we got a lot of guidance on who we should talk to, who are the top like people we should interact with in terms of banking or law firms or brokers or even capital providers at some point in time. We also worked with BMA from the very beginning. I mean, we were very close with BMA for a little while, even during my past life in my previous job. So yeah, it literally took us, and I can tell you this, it literally took us 2 weeks to run through the process of setting up, registering the company here, and also getting a Bermuda agency license. It was really fast, very smooth. At no point we had any confusion. And anytime we had any questions, we could go back to either BDA or BMA and ask those and get clarified. So yeah, our process has been smooth. And after that, through the setup process with work permits, we did have a huge amount of help from the BDA, and we still are very much connected with the rest of the ecosystem. And going forward, I think like we are with our latest capital raise, a large part of it, again, is going to come to Bermuda because of the certainty that we've seen in the early days. We think that the story is going to actually over a period of time, we're going to see the processes even more dovetail for incoming InsurTechs and investors who want to invest in the Bermuda jurisdiction and the companies formed here.
Great, thank you. And just can you, for our audience, in case they don't know, just give us the 30-second high-level pitch on Envelop?
Yeah,
what
sure.
are you doing? Yeah.
Sure, 100%. So Envelop Risk, we are one of the cyber reinsurance specialists. So we are at this point in time within the top 5 cyber reinsurers in the world, the largest excess of loss reinsurer when it comes to cyber. And the way we offer or operate our products is through the proprietary AI technology that we have. And we have a huge amount of data that we have aggregated over the past many years. Which kind of like looks at the open ports and everything inside out, and also like we got a lot of information coming to the claims channels. Yeah, we could like with a very high degree of certainty, we can predict what the cyber risk landscape is going to look like and be able to underwrite against that. The idea was not to like set up another InsurTech which is focused on distribution. Most of the other InsurTechs that we have seen in recent past are focused mainly on the distribution side of it. We wanted to go for the heart of the insurance and reinsurance, where we targeted the underwriting excellence and how we can use AI and human expertise to work together to like build a really much more profitable book than the existing market can offer.
That's great, thank you. And I think it adds some context to the why Bermuda to hear your really specific business here. And Andrew, how about you?
Yeah, it was a similar experience. And I have to say, you know, as a startup, it is a undeniable fact that basically your single biggest threat is your cash burn rate. So all startups start out with a minimal amount of cash. And so your ability to get to market and to essentially hit what they call product market fit and start deploying product and you know, getting income or revenue is an absolute race against time. And we always see, like, you know, the classic stories of eating ramen and living in garages. As someone with a wife and 2 kids who have an addiction to Paw Patrol, that means my timeline is even shorter to hit revenue. And Bermuda just played this incredible role at it. And it was as you know, as basic as a story is walking down to the Bermuda Development Agency, meeting with the local leader there, Jasmine De Silva, and asking her, hey, I want to start a reinsurance company. Am I insane? And luckily her response was not, you are. Yeah, you should go back to doing what you're doing. Instead, the response was, yep, here's the list. Here's the law firm you're going to talk to. Here's the insurance manager. These are all the regulatory requirements. Here's every single checklist you're going to need to do. And it was an absolutely attainable and really feasible like goal structure they put up into it. And even throughout the entire process, I mean, we were literally just meeting with the BMA yesterday on our cyber policy. And again, you know, if you look at a lot of the other regulatory regimes, it's critically in conflict where you have, okay, you want to be as innovative as possible. And at the same time, you don't want to just let in a bunch of bad actors that completely blow up the regulatory framework, throw
absolutely
through and essentially bring down the house. So it's a balance, but like the cyber experience we've had is exactly case in point how it should be done, where we're saying, look, you know, we actually don't have that much PII. We're using satellite imagery from VIIRS, MERS, and MODIS and LIDAR. These are all open source data sets. And also we have, you know, a very innovative distributed framework structure in the way that we're like securing data. And so having this like really innovative way that the BMA is able to relate to us and say, absolutely, here's what we're most concerned about. Do not lose customer data. Do not lose this payment data. You know, make sure that you are checking counterparties against whatever, you know, TRIA or whatever regulation it may be. and understanding, okay, they have a very, very in-depth view in what's important in the regulatory framework and what needs to be provided there, but also being very reactive and being able to adapt and saying, yeah, we get this. You guys don't need to, have triple encryption on something that anyone can search on Google for. And so it's just critically important to the core of what a startup is, which is moving as fast as possible.
Great, thank you. And the 30-second Kettle pitch.
Yeah. Similar to Ari and Envelop, we use quantitative and mathematical strategies that were popularized in the quant and equities markets and quant hedge fund world to get a better understanding of large sets of data, satellite imagery, weather data maps, to do a better job of understanding risk in climate affected regions. That allows us, we specifically focus on wildfire today, but allows us to get a far more accurate view of that risk and then understand what areas are best to underwrite and expand into.
Great, thank you very much. Matt, I'm going to turn to you because I think you may have a similar experience, but a very different sort of take on the business. So yes, over to you.
Absolutely. So perhaps just to give a little bit of context on who we are at Anthemis. So we are a venture capital firm that focuses on financial services. And within the firm, I work on our investments related to the topic of insurance and risk management. And over the last few years in particular, we've moved to now be the most active venture investor in insurance globally. And off the back of that, when we are investing, especially at the really earliest stages of a new company's development, one of the questions or one of the topics that we'll typically get involved with at the board level, for example, is how the company and the structure and all of these enabling factors that have to be taken into account should be optimized, and how the company should go about building the infrastructure that it needs in order to achieve the objectives that it's got. And so one of the things that we do as an investor is essentially act as almost a curator of best practice, and we act as something of a signpost almost for the companies that are approaching us. And so, for example, if a company comes to us in London and says, hey, do you have a law firm that you can recommend? Then we're able to put people in touch with the right people. But then sometimes, the topic turns to really, sometimes quite intimidating and daunting topics like capital and where you're domiciled and regulation. And so we draw upon, extensively draw upon the experiences of our portfolio, the companies that we've backed previously, in order to nudge them in the right direction. And we have a handful of companies now that have got operations in Bermuda, including Andrew and his team at Kettle. And so their experience, I would say, really, I guess, really speaks for itself. And I think one of the things that's interesting about how we approach investments in the insurance space is that many of the companies that we're backing are kind of at the edge of what's possible and are kind of pushing the boundaries with respect to what they're building. And so, as I was kind of hinting at earlier on, it's really important that they're in a location that enables them to experiment and to kind of figure things out as they go, but they're also doing that within a kind of very robust regulatory framework. And so, as I mentioned earlier on, right, Bermuda benefits from having a really exceptionally strong center of competence known around the world. And so it's no surprise that many of the companies that we've backed, and I'm sure some of the companies that we'll back in the future, have opted to get set up there and build their business there. Great,
thank you. And George, I'm going to come back to you for a second because as we were, sort of preparing for our discussions here, one of the concepts that is becoming more prevalent, I think, and Matt, you touched on it a little bit, is really the convergence between the, sort of the financial space and the insurance space and the tech space altogether, and the BMA's response to that. And George, you've sort of been at the center of all of these discussions here, so I'm going to give you a chance to respond to that because I know it's something that you're seeing and have some thoughts about.
Sure, I'll address your question on what we're saying on the market convergences, and forgive me a little with the if I ramble a little bit on the how the BMA responded to that. So that I'll take that as my 30-second pitch, just like the other
Sure, that would be
panelists
great.
here.
Thank you.
So we've seen market convergences happening for many years now, and it's usually a combination of coming from really two angles. So first is the technological possibility, as well as the ongoing search for higher yield or alpha across sectors, whether it's from the investment perspective or from the insurance company's perspective. So obviously, when you combine a market need with an opportunity, you get a natural move towards that sweet spot where players can benefit from being able to offer services that were together, that were previously offered by more than at least more than one entity. So the creation of ILS is a clear example of that convergence, and Bermuda has been quite lucky to be swift and so far successful in making sure that it gets a significant share of the market. And so today, fast forward 10 days out, 10 years after, ILS funds and sidecars and all those other strategies are now very common tool for companies to access third-party capital, for example, and really overall serve as a risk management framework and even as a source of additional revenue for companies doing it. So but that's I would say history now, and recently with the acceleration of technological possibilities, when you mix market needs and this opportunity with an enabling technology, you can expect a whole new level of transformation to take place. So the emergence of blockchain, artificial intelligence, as Andrew has mentioned earlier, and eventually the boom of digital assets, in a few years back, gave birth to new opportunities across insurance, investments, and now, with payment systems altogether, geared towards interconnectivity among these sectors. So for our part, the BMA has, to respond to that, to adapt is we have created and provided a comprehensive digital asset business regulation with the introduction of DABA back in 2018, and now more recently, even the crowdfunding sector, we have also taken that on through our Digital Asset Issuance Act of 2020. This is really to make sure that these sectors are allowed to thrive in a regulated environment. So in parallel with this, you have alluded to this earlier, Matthew, with the Sandbox and Innovation Hub. We built these frameworks as well back in 2018. First with insurance and digital assets as the first two use cases where market players can test their ideas in a safe and controlled environment. So this is particularly important, especially for business models that are currently, I would say, beyond their time and fall outside our traditional classes. So further to this, though, we have introduced new classes of insurers and intermediaries to make sure that whatever these companies that are currently in our Sandbox and Innovation Hub will have somewhere to graduate into, where their business models don't currently fit within our traditional classes. So having said all of this, I would say though that we are not blind. The BMA is aware fully of the inherent as well as the new risks that are coming out of all this innovation and market convergences. So because of this, we have embedded in the legislation itself, as well as the supporting regulations and codes of conducts, a clear but risk-based policy and guidance to the market. So especially on critical matters like cybersecurity, as Andrew has alluded earlier, and even to things like sanctions and AML and ATF risk. So this to us right now are the non-negotiables. So we can let companies play here, but we really want them to have compliance and regulation on top of their mind, and not just really trying to address whatever forms or whatever checklist that we give them, but in spirit really trying to get into the actual risk or the concerns that will keep us up at night, and addressing this in whatever manner that is available by the technology advancement right now. So I mentioned about the Sandbox and Innovation Hub earlier, available now for insurance and digital assets. But what's going to happen is that later on this year, we will be coming out as well with, opening all the other sectors into this. So, things like banking sector, the investment, the funds themselves, they will all be, we're going to open the gateway as well for these sectors to have, both frameworks available for them, for companies to come here in Bermuda.
Great, thank you. So you've definitely captured, I think, the essence of what all of our panelists have been sharing about their experiences in Bermuda, and Bermuda as a domicile really equivalent to Silicon Valley. So I have one perhaps last question for all of our panelists before we begin to wrap up. And I think the BDA on the bags that you might see if you're ever here, Bermuda is the risk capital of the world, is a phrase that's been linked to Bermuda for quite a long time. And I'm just really curious, based on your experiences here in Bermuda, your past experiences, how has sort of the traditional insurance and reinsurance companies that are here, how do you see them responding to this new world of InsurTech, these new risks, this convergence of finance and insurance coming together? And it's often you have a foot in both camps, right? Because capital resides in certain places, innovation often resides in others, and sometimes they need to come together. So I think it would just be useful to get just a short, take on your sense of Bermuda as a whole, and the industry itself, and how you see some support for innovation and this new kind of direction that George has also described. Matt, you're shaking your head, so I'm going to let you start this time.
No, it's a question that we talk about a lot. So how are they responding? I would say it really runs the gamut in terms of, there are some folks that I think InsurTech with a lot of suspicion, and there's a sense that, well, we've been doing business this way for a really long time, it kind of works, and so this kind of whole tech thing is quite complicated and difficult to understand, and so we'll just kind of or either forget about it or try to hope that it disappears for a little bit, or perhaps indefinitely. At the other end of the spectrum, you've got the folks that I think are the ones that are going to survive, the ones that realize that tech isn't going anywhere, and are the ones that are embracing partnerships with companies such as those folks on the call here. I would say that in Bermuda in particular, my impression is that because of the way that business has been done previously, companies that are here are probably ever so slightly better suited to what's going to happen with technology, and partnering with external organizations that bring something different. And I think because, as I was kind of hinting at earlier on, because a lot of these tech companies are at the edge and working on quite creative solutions to really quite difficult problems, I think that means that the companies in Bermuda are probably a really good fit. Some insurance companies, other responses from insurers, some of them are backing venture funds such as us, because they want to have both direct financial exposure, but also a deeper understanding of what's happening in the market. Who should I talk to? Who should I not talk to? Who should I just outright avoid? And they want to kind of better understand and prepare themselves for any emerging threats that might be in some way connected to tech. So overall, I feel very positive. I think it's just that each company is in a unique situation, and each of them have got quite a different response to InsurTech and what's happening. We love working with everyone in the space, regardless of, I guess, what they think of it.
Great, thank you. Does anybody else like to comment on that? Ari.
Yeah, sure. That's very well said. I myself come from a traditional background, and in my previous life, I've seen how the traditional companies view InsurTechs and blockchain. So there's either a bit of like, hey, we have to get on this train. We're going to miss this if we don't do this, without really understanding how the technology works. They tend to jump on it. or the other end of the spectrum, where they say, hey, we are doing this in a very traditional way. We don't see how this is going to change. And again, like the second type of firms, like who think that everything needs to be traditional, is actually reducing. We have seen in last like 4 or 5 years, we have seen almost every reinsurer today has some sort of InsurTech, either partnership or investment. And I believe it has been much larger. When we went to raise capital, we found the best and the most knowledgeable VCs are those who are corporate VCs rather than the original VCs from Silicon Valley or elsewhere, because they understand how the business is done, and they see how what we have built can be used in both traditional and the futuristic way, and they can appreciate that. But who doesn't have that insight, they think, oh, everything can be done on a platform, but hey, it can't be, because reinsurance is a fundamentally complex business. You still need someone in the middle to kind of like explain to the client on what is happening and try to like fix the terms and conditions. So that will be quite interesting. The other part which Bermuda has done really well, and I really want to like thank BMA for being like proactive rather than reactive, and being transparent as well, is the work that they have done with the digital asset businesses. In my thinking, in next like 5 years or so, within next 5 years, there will be a confluence of like insurance and reinsurance business with DeFi and with also AI. So AI would be definitely quite necessary, because you can't really take like 5 days to sort of resolve an underwriting problem. It has to be quite quick, and you need to have data from various disparate sources. So Bermuda has done really well by actually investing in all of this and having an existing insurance infrastructure which is already in place. So I think we are like miles ahead than most of the other jurisdictions, especially the onshore ones that we have seen, like in much larger jurisdictions, where there's a lot of disconnect between the regulators and what is happening in the ecosystem, where they come back and say like, hey, we will enforce rather than guide you with innovation. So I think that's one of the key reasons the money that we raised, and we probably will create our own risk carrier at some point in time. Chances are very high that it would be like Bermuda would be our first choice, and most of the underwriting capital and our underwriting resources and AI and all the intellectual capital actually sits here in Bermuda locally. So yeah.
Great. Andrew, any comments on that?
Yeah, I can just speak for our personal experience in it, and it's been absolutely incredible and really refreshing to see, especially in this type of market. I think if we are looking at starting again, you know, like Ari said, like a distribution type strategy in the front end, which we've seen quite a bit of, and you're trying to partner with a lot of these like bigger entities inside of the US, you might be dealing with kind of like an offshoot division of the company that's, you know, purely focused in innovation. But the Bermuda market is completely different to that. You know, we've had direct relationship and access to you know, the capital partners we've worked with and the CUOs, the CEOs of this company. I think that's indicative of what the market has been overall. Like when you look at reinsurance in its history, whenever there's huge events like Andrew, or you have 9/11, you have the cat bond industry, where it's actually one of the first places that looks at it and goes, all right, is there a new type of product to fundamentally cover whatever needs to be covered in this space? And I think that's already built into the DNA of the Bermuda reinsurance market as a whole. And so as you see innovation coming in, it's obvious climate change is one of these things where if you look at it at a temporal scale, I think there's a lot of patterns behind it. But if we look at the past 15 years, there's just been a nonlinear ramp up that's been so fast, and it's becoming more and more undeniable that the only way to respond to it is having an incredibly rapid response And so you have to have an environment where, again, that counterparty trust is incredibly deep, and you're able to build relationships at a very fast pace and then make larger decisions in a very quick time frame. And I think there's really no other place in the world where you get this amount of capital that's necessary to actually protect something at the scale of a Florida or California or Texas. At the same time, being able to bring in that innovation and being able to relate the true underpinnings of what's going on inside of the technology, not just saying, hey, we're doing ML, trust us, because I think you hear a lot of lip service to that. And we hear a lot of it of, oh yeah, machine learning is being used, but you have to have a very, very in-depth explanation and understanding, because you can't just throw ML at a problem and magically it solves it. There's a litany of back testing mathematics that needs to be done. So having that direct relationship to the decision makers who control that capital at the end of the day is critical for being able to meet the current need that we are seeing with this increased changing climate.
Great, thank you. And just before we close, that just kind of brings us full circle, right, back to the beginning of these parallels between Silicon Valley and Bermuda, and this concentration and access that parties have to each other, and the ability to understand and work together and innovate together, and focused around a knowledgeable regulator that can support many iterations of that, I think is a nice way to think about this. So I will ask each of you if you have any closing comments to share them now, with regard to anything you'd like our audience to take away, one more sentence about Bermuda as the Silicon Valley of the Atlantic, or just in general. So are there any other comments?
I'm happy to say I think the future is really bright, and I think there's a lot of exciting stuff that's going to happen over the next few years. And so from my perspective, if you are an insurance startup looking to get backing from a venture investor that understands the industry, please don't hesitate to give me a call or drop me a line.
Great, Matthew, thank you very much. Hopefully you'll get your inbox exploding. That would be great. Anybody else?
I can probably add something as well. So I think really for us is with Bermuda, they can be assured of having regulatory certainty, and I think something something like that should help them, companies wherever they are in whatever stage they are in with their business development, to get to the next steps, gain scale, and obtain market confidence by having a regulatory framework that is appropriate for them. So just putting it out there.
Great, thank you very much. And I'm going to thank all of you on our panel for joining us and for your insights and comments. We are moving to a live Q&A session, so if any members of our audience would like to submit questions, our panelists will be available to answer those immediately following this session. Thank you very much.
Thank you.